Hi there, this is Unknown Brother 273, and in this video I'm going to talk about why Darkfighter and Lightbringer are both the Rival Sons' best albums. So, both of these albums came out last year in 2023, and in case you haven't heard them, they are some of their best albums for sure, and in my opinion, their best albums. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. So the first one, Darkfighter, was released on June 2nd. It was going to be released, I think, in March, but it had some sort of delay. And then the next one wasn't released until October 2020. So, in my opinion, because this was the longest gap between Rival Sons albums so far, that had something to do with the higher quality. Like, I really like all of the Rival Sons albums, definitely. But these are the ones that some of these songs are what really got me into them more. I've been a fan since the Head Down days and became a way bigger fan last year from these. Specifically, the song Bird in the Hand is what got me a lot more into them. And I have an interesting story about that song, but that's for a different day. But I think that because there was a 4-year gap between Feral Roots and Darkfighter might be part of the reason why that they had a little bit more time to spend on things for this. And as you can hear in the track-by-track explanation and some interviews, Jay talks about how, and the crazy times that there's been, especially right after the Feral Roots album, influenced some of the lyrics that he had.
I think that both Darkfighter and Lightbringer are the most autobiographical Rival Sons albums for me. For my writing, certainly, I think I wrote closer to the bone and more directly from the heart than I ever have before.
I had some really unfortunate deaths, a lot in a very short amount of time, that were extremely close to me. Now, all of these things, I think, distilled a very strong desire to want to only make art that I truly resonate with or that truly means something to me. And so the word Darkfighter goes back to, it's a term that I've used to describe certain people that I've known around the world that that are like the problem solvers. You know, I'm fortunate to have some really special people in my life that I know that these are people that actively try to make things better, you know.
Musically, they're just as good as always because every single Rival Sons album is just completely awesome, in my opinion. Everything that's on it. But I have to say, what definitely improved with this album, I think, were the lyrics. Not that they were bad before, but I feel like way more deep and meaningful than they were before, even just on the last album, Feral Roots. Most albums that I really like a lot, there still are a couple tracks on them that I don't like quite as much. The thing about these two albums is that that's not the case. No single track on either album is a downer to me in any way. They're all very strong, and obviously 14 tracks total between the two. So both are pretty short, so there may have been some extra tracks that got taken off, possibly. But I think the way that it's divided also works really well. The theme of the albums, and it's said best for Jay that one album is not really dark and one is light, even though the titles seem to indicate that. I thought that at first. Said, okay, this one was pretty dark. When this one comes out, it's going to be a really bright album.
Can we expect the Lightbringer album to be the sunny counterpart for Darkfighter?
I would not call it sunny. I would say that it is closure, where Darkfighter is very open-ended when you finish it. You know, that song Dark Side. It's very much, it leaves you on the edge.
I go through each member of the band and something really cool that they add to this album. And I'll start out with Dave. So sometimes it can be, some people might overlook what things Dave Best might do because he doesn't necessarily have bass solos or anything really in any Rival Sons songs in particular. However, he's doing things behind the scenes that you might not realize. One example is on Mirrors, and the breakdown at the end of the track. There's something that it took me a while to be able to hear it because it's during Scott Holiday's solo, but you can hear Dave going right down, kind of highlighting a little theme there when he's going D, C, B flat and that pattern. And that's something that is pretty cool, and it adds a lot to the song that you might not even think of. There are a lot of other examples of what he does on those two albums. Then we move on to Todd. Obviously, this is really the first Rival Sons album that has a more major keyboard focus on it. I mean, we've heard keyboards on previous albums, but not like we do on this. Obviously, the intro to Mirrors and then the complete solo in the song Darkfighter. Then Miley, well, we know he's always on top of keeping the energy up, but there's some even crazier than usual things that you might not have noticed. So the first major one is, if you notice, there's something pretty interesting in the track Guillotine. In that track, towards the middle, it switches to 6/8. Well, how can it be so smooth? Only Michael Miley can do it. Then also, there's a lot of craziness going on for Sweet Life. I mean, that track is just probably the most energetic of all, and I really like it. But some of the parts that are in it are just like, the energy is upheld by what he does, like in some of the fills. Then we move on to Scott. Well, we know Scott Holiday, he always has his awesome solos in pretty much every Rival Sons song, and always has awesome riffs. He's the riff master, the fuzz lord. But some more notable ones that you might not think of, that are kind of usual, if you want to say, the usual Holiday that we know. Well, think about songs more on Darkfighter as usual Holiday we know. Think about Nobody Wants to Die. That's a classic sound of what kind of solo he does. Also on Guillotine, we have a some deeper riffs than ever before. We've had some very deep riffs before, like on Too Bad, for example, or even on a song like Fade Out. But we know for sure that the deepest Holiday riff so far has been on Dark Side. Even Jay says so himself. And then the best thing about Scott Holiday, I think, is some new Holiday explorations, specifically on this album, Lightbringer. When I first heard this album, it was a little bit strange because I actually was driving when it turned midnight on October 20th, and I kind of have fuzzy speakers in my car, so it was a little bit hard for me to hear, but I was very shocked when I heard Darkfighter and Before the Fire, those two tracks in particular, because we hear some interesting holidays that we've never heard before. Very interesting sliding going on, and some of the most genius progressions that I've ever heard in my life, especially on Before the Fire. And then Darkfighter, I mean, that's just has to be one of the top 5 best Rival Sons songs. I don't know who could disagree. Then even the last track, Mosaic, has quite an odd progression for sounding more poppy. When I first heard that one, I was like, this is kind of more of a poppy one. But it took me a second to realize how the beginning is a very interesting progression that is very crazy. But it is the perfect way to end the masterpiece of these two albums, for sure. I deeply believe in the order of tracks mattering on an album, and I couldn't have picked a better order myself than the way that they have it on here. It's completely perfect. We are left at the end of Darkfighter, wondering what could be next. I mean, Dark Side is the perfect way to end that, and then we get the continuation with Darkfighter, and we end with Mosaic. Moving on to the last member that I haven't talked about that much yet, Jay. Well, of course, he's a singer. Can't overlook that. I already told you that I think his lyrics are the best on here of all and are very meaningful. But we even have some powerful Buchanan screams, even more extreme than before, although not as crazy as Secret. I think the screams that he has on these albums somehow just add a lot of power to it. And, and that definitely transitions live. I think another thing that's great about these albums is that even some of my favorite albums might not be super friendly for the general public because they might just be a little bit too much. I like a band called Fish. If you don't know about them, they're not very public friendly. So that doesn't really work out. But these two albums, they have a perfect balance between all the singles that they released, which are very friendly for a new audience. And then they also have other ones that are just the powerful gems that are otherwise, which is the case for a lot of bands. I feel like their better songs sometimes are the ones that weren't released as singles. And because there might be too much for the general audience to take, or too long or something. And then the last thing I'm going to say, which is kind of a minor thing about this, but their music videos I think were really good, and I almost wish there were more, but they really were fun. I think definitely Nobody Wants to Die is their best music video of all, and I'm sure it's probably their most fun to make too. And that was really the thing that got me more into the Rival Sons. Is when I first saw that, I hadn't listened to them in a decent while, not really much since the Great Western Valkyrie days. But as soon as I saw that Nobody Wants to Die video, I got a lot more into them again. And that, crazy enough, that was already almost 2 years ago. But all 3 of those music videos that they released, they perfectly tie in the story. And you know what? That's pretty much it. So, I think all of their albums are great, but I really think that these are the top Rival Sons albums so far. And I'm going to be really interested to see what they might have next. But as for now, in case you didn't know, they're going on Tour of America starting in a little bit less than a month. Two-Headed Beast Tour, and if you want to hear a lot on Great Western Valkyrie as well as some of their new stuff, go ahead and go to one of those shows. So that'll be it. Thanks for watching.